All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deb McNally. I'm the director of the City of Tacoma Parks Housing and Community Development Department. And today we're going to have an information session about an RFP that we released for a review of our rent stabilization policy. So I'll start with a little bit about the policy itself, then talk about the study, what our goals are, and then dive into a little bit of the RFP, and then we'll open it up for any questions from the audience. So starting with the policy itself, this policy has been around in the city since 1980. It has had subsequent changes over time, but right now it governs about half of the city's rental units. There are exemptions, as with most rent stabilization policies, and we do have a method for getting a fair return. We call it our fair return petition. Most of our properties that are rent stabilized are 6 units or fewer, but most of the units are kind of in our more typical multifamily stock, which are either mid-rise or high-rise apartments. Roughly 40% of our rent stabilized properties are self-managed as reported annually as part of our rental licensing process. So the last kind of effort around rent stabilization and a review was done in 2005. And so recognizing that, our council has kind of put forward direction to staff to take a look at the ordinance and kind of how its impacts are today's and ways that it can be enhanced to improve its effectiveness. So as part of that, staff developed this RFP with the goal of examining best practices with rent stabilization around the country, engaging with local stakeholders, including tenants and landlords, to understand where things are working well and where they might need some improvements, and then utilizing data to help supplement those kind of observations, and then providing recommendations for modifications based on these best practices and the concerns identified through this process. It's very important to note up front, we are not looking to repeal or completely do away with rent stabilization. This is really a goal. The goal of this is enhancing its effectiveness. So with that, staff have gone and crafted this RFP around that kind of general guideline. So starting with kind of the first task, which is a review of the program and an impact analysis. So looking at the program itself, summarizing its key programs, looking at literature review around rent stabilization models, and where the city falls along that, collecting and analyzing relevant data. We have historical rent reports going back into the 90s, as well as other various data sources. We would be looking for feedback from the consultant on kind of other data sources that we could use. Having some initial stakeholder focus groups. What I will say is that city staff will help with putting those stakeholder groups together, but we would like some input in kind of what questions and running the focus groups, and then producing an impact report addressing kind of all these different facets of what rent stabilization is doing, and presenting that kind of as a ending point for City Council for feedback and direction, which then leads into task 2, which is the development of recommendations and further community engagement. So there's a public meeting element to it. So there will be a couple of different public meetings where the general public can come in and kind of get information, provide feedback, and then as part of this policy, re-engaging with those focus groups, and then also looking for 2 to 3 peer jurisdictions that we can pull ideas from. And based on that, going through an iterative process of developing these kind of recommendations through the public engagement, but then also work sessions with the City Council. And then kind of taking that all together, task 3 is pulling that into kind of a fully fledged report with those recommendations and kind of citing those examples from comparative jurisdictions or other places. And within this final report, kind of within those recommendations, thinking particularly about racial equity when we're putting these together. And so that is kind of the three main goals, right, or tasks. The fourth task has to do with project management. So we obviously understand that this is a very big project. And so what we're looking for is something like bi-weekly check-ins and detailed invoices, kind of breaking down the work being done so that staff are well apprised and working collaboratively with the consultant. So in terms of the tentative timeline, what I would say is this is subject to change if we need to extend this RFP, but currently the RFP opened July 8th and is planned to close August 22nd. So we have about a month to go still. The proposal review will begin that Monday, and we will work to expedite that review because we realize that we have a council that will be going into elections in 2026. So we want to start this process as soon as possible. We may bring forward some interviews, and those would take place between the 8th and the 12th, with the selected firm announcement on the 16th, with the hope of a consultant beginning work on October 1st. So when we're looking at these responses, these are kind of the 5 key things we're looking at, ranked in order of importance. So the most important is a response that develops an approach that meets the requirements of the RFP and shows kind of a deep understanding of how this can be undertaken. A demonstration, kind of the qualifications, but the demonstration of similar projects completed, and that kind of pairs with the qualifications and experience of key personnel. We'll also want some client references, and then we'll also be looking at cost as well as a factor. So there are a number of different submission requirements. So I'll try to break this down. We want all of them to have a cover letter that kind of lays out very briefly kind of the firm. And then the second part is the process of services. So this is the narrative response that lays out the approach that you'll be taking on this, kind of what services, if you're changing any of the kind of tasks, this is a chance to kind of explain why those tasks are being changed. We'll then want a section on qualifications and experience, an assurances regarding capacity and no conflicts of interest. So we want to make sure that you are providing us with assurance that you can complete the project and that you have no conflicts of interest. We then would like some references, so 3 recent projects, and then a cost estimate and fee schedule. The final 3 are statements that are required under city law for any of our contractors. This includes non-involvement in nuclear weapons and a living wage requirements certification. And we are happy to provide kind of information that is also in the RFP though as well. So typically, this is an example cost estimate that kind of we have reviewed in the past. We want to break it down by task and ideally, if possible, kind of within those subtasks so that we can understand what the cost is for each one, and if there needs to be maybe adjustments based on those, if let's say it's over budget to some degree. Most importantly, submission details and questions. Please provide it as one PDF to myself in an email, which is devinm@tacomaparkmd.gov, with the subject line of the RFP number. If you do have any questions, please email myself and use the subject line RFP-rent stabilization clarification. This is so that I can track them and respond to them in turn. And I will be accepting them basically up until the deadline. Unfortunately, we will not be able to consider late submissions for our procurement policies. So please make sure that if you are planning to submit, I would recommend submitting well in advance of the deadline, just in case you have a computer glitch or something like that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. feel free to raise your hand and I can allow you to talk. All right, Meg, you should be able to ask a question now.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was wondering if this is a unique and exciting opportunity, and I'm wondering if Tacoma Park has done any similar sort of policy analyses or reviews that were really a standout that would be a helpful reference as we're thinking about how to design the project.
Yes. So in thinking off the top of my head, I would say our public space management plan was very well done, and you can see it on our website.
Great.
Um, we have had some really good work previously, honestly, on the bikeway and traffic planning world. So our Maple Avenue connectivity project, and then also thinking through our, and I'm blanking on the name, so I apologize, our Purple Line connector project as well. So those are two examples. We also just recently did an RFP for a Ward 6 traffic study as well. And that was awarded to Tool Design Group, and they had a very professional response.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, I will end this for now. If you do have any questions, once again, you can email myself um, with any other kind of follow-up questions. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time today to sit through kind of the information session, and we look forward to all of your responses to the RFP. Oh, a question really quick. Is the PowerPoint available for download? We will make sure that it is posted on our website, and I'm happy to share that once it is posted. So, any other final questions? All right. Thank you all very much.